be my thought anyway.
Okay.
Okay, so we are back live on YouTube. I think everybody should be back in here. So that should be working. Okay. So we're gonna rewind briefly to board committee reports, item 5F. So I'll start with policy committee, and then Devin will catch us up on diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. On the policy committee, I think everyone's aware that we've been meeting weekly, working our way through the sort of template language that exists for that's provided by CABE. I think we've talked many times in terms of sort of our process for going through the policy committee, and again would invite anyone interested in the topic to show up. We've recently had a call to talk about two topics. One, the sort of governance of the tri-boards and drafting some language to create some guidelines for the way that we sort of interact between the various boards. And we intend to take that up. We will probably take that up in an evening session. And so you'll see invites for a policy committee meeting in the evening to give as many people on the various boards an opportunity to attend. And we'll try to have a constructive framework so that we can discuss that effectively. The other item we were asked to evaluate is a social media policy specifically related to employees. In our last meeting, we discussed some of the guidance that we've received from our attorneys at Shipman and Goodwin related to the complexity of these. Connecticut in particular has a law on the books that is very much in favor of the sort of political speech and protected speech of employees, not just in public institutions, but also in private. And so it has been difficult for us to sort of find our way to some language. Shipman shared some language that we'd like to look at as example language that could work for us. And we intend to review that language and present a draft back to our respective boards at our earliest convenience. Any questions with relation to the policy committee? Okay.
Thanks
Devin?
for all your work on that, John. That is
Sure.
that is a lot of tough sledding.
Thank you, Jeff. Devin?
Right. So the DEI committee met last week, I think it was, and we, talked a little bit about, collecting data. So where we are in the process, I think the committee was formed last spring, has had we went through a process to identify community members of the school communities, as well as students to add to the committee. And now we're more in a data collection phase of the process. And so we've formed a smaller subcommittee that is looking at different surveys that we can send to different subgroups within our communities. So different grade groups at each of the 5 schools, to faculty, to staff, to families. We have a small subgroup meeting tomorrow to kind of identify research questions that we hope to answer through the surveys, which will help us then identify which third-party survey we will use. And then we can start talking through the process by which we will administer those surveys, analyze the results, and then potentially move into some focus groups based on what we find from the data in the surveys. Any questions?
Any questions for Devin?
I'm just curious to understand more the purpose of the surveys.
It's a good question. So we're actually trying to identify kind of what we define the purpose of the surveys are. I would say at a high level, kind of a school climate survey around how do students feel, safe in school, kind of looking at how they feel about things that are taught, or bullying, or other types of climate types of things that could potentially happen in their school, and similar climate types of surveys for teachers and staff. and families. So kind of trying to get at, do students feel basically safe in our schools? Does the community feel inclusive? Are there differences between different grades or different genders or different races, to help kind of identify where our strengths are as a community and where potentially there's some opportunities as a community?
Devin, have you had a chance to look at the climate surveys that are done at Keller and at Staples?
Yeah, that was my next question too.
So during the last meeting, we had asked about those surveys. I have not seen that information, so I have not had a chance to look at them. I know there's been go ahead, John.
Yeah, if I can add, so that sort of subcommittee of, Devin and I think it was 2 other members. One of the members is someone who's helped to actually carry out that survey. So they have a significant amount of familiarity with it and sort of know exactly. So we have members, I think just for everybody's refresher, we have members from each one of the schools, we have members from each of the communities, and we have student representatives on the DEI committee. And so one of the committee members who's along with Devin helping to run the survey work stream is actually someone who's helped to carry out that climate survey in the past.
Which climate survey? The ones that we have already?
Yes.
Be anticipating different answers, or is the survey going to be different than the climate? I guess I'm confused. Is the climate survey the same thing?
Exactly.
Or no, it's not the same thing.
It's not exactly the same thing, right? There's sort of a different specific focus and sort of weighting on certain things that they're looking to understand.
So we are still, I guess, defining the purpose of the survey. And once we have done that tomorrow, it'll help us either choose a survey that already exists or craft a survey. There's tools out there that you can use to actually build a survey with research questions that have already been designed by researchers. So they're free of bias. They have analytics behind them so that we can actually trust the data that we receive. It's like a valid and reliable piece of information. We're also, not wanting to only focus on students, but also want to hear data from faculty, staff, and families. So looking at doing, different surveys that kind of hit at some of the same goals so we can get data from, multiple constituents within our communities.
And I assume that this survey, once you guys develop it, you're going to get board approval before it gets sent out.
Oh yeah, we're kind of at I would say relatively early in this process of identifying the research questions, and then from there, part of the goal tomorrow night is kind of narrowing down the research questions so the survey isn't 20 pages long. And, thinking through which surveys already exist so that we're not also, writing our own survey questions, which would not be in the best interest of getting good data. And then from there, we would put it, to the committee and then to the board.
John, I'm not sure, maybe you could help us with sort of the best avenue to sort of participate in this conversation or ask questions or provide feedback, because I'm not clear that this is, like in board committee reports is really the time to sort of engage in discussion. I just want to be mindful of kind of the rules of conversation here, because I'm a lot of questions are coming to mind and comments, and I just wanted to get your feedback on that.
Yeah, I think certainly sending them back with Devin or myself as we attend the DEI meetings. I think also, certainly all committee meetings are open to all board members. And, the best practice is that you allow the committee members to, participate fully, but
do their thing and then bring it back to the board. Yeah.
Exactly. But certainly to attend those meetings as well and to send your questions and all of that, like we're very, very interested in hearing from all members. And we'd like as sort of fulsome participation as possible. Okay. Any additional questions for Devin? Okay, very good. Sorry, I'm just getting my bearings on the order. Here we are. So we are now at 6B. Sorry, so another item that's come up in the policy committee, from time to time, we're asked to evaluate more, I don't want to use the word urgent, but sort of pressing policies that come down. So this is actually a part of Title IX policies that were passed under the last presidential administration related to the reporting of sexual harassment, training of employees, et cetera, for that, and sort of the sort of appropriate ways of carrying out discipline. Those changes to Title IX, we sort of got those late in the year last year and asked attorneys more recently, does it make sense? It sounds like there may be some shift on those policies. What's the right approach for us? And our attorneys advised us, you need to adopt those now. And if there are then changes, then you can adopt those changes then. You can't just hold off on sort of making changes because it's expedient. So tonight, the intent is to let everyone know that that is a policy being considered. The full text of the policy we'll make sure is shared with everyone. We discussed it in public session, put it up on the screen, and we'll share it with everybody. It's several pages, and the intent is not that we're operating like the Knesset and actually reading it word for word here tonight, but it's to inform you that the characteristics of the policy and that it's something that's being considered. We would hope to move to a second reading, probably not this Thursday, probably at our March meeting, and then ideally to approve after that. So there'll be ample opportunity for people to review that between now and our March meeting. Any questions about the Title IX policy that we're looking at?
John, when will we get a copy of that?
We're making some minor edits to include specific school personnel, but we could send you even the version that doesn't have that tonight.
If you could send a draft, I think it'd be
Yep.
worthwhile. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay. Any additional questions? All right. Very good. That takes us to 6C. Dr. Harrison?
Good evening again, everyone. So we've had a number of discussions about the budget between the last meeting and this one. One of the things that we wanted to do tonight, kind of as the start to this budget workshop, and then following up with further discussion on Thursday, is to go back to one of our initial budget conversations when we first started to talk about our contractual obligations, and really looking at the sort of big ticket items that were our major budget drivers. We felt like tonight would be a good time to sort of go back to that list, talk about some of the priorities on the list, and make any necessary changes, and then be able to have further discussion on Thursday, where we got a little bit more detailed on getting down to sort of the next layer and making some determinations and recommendations about potential cuts. I think that we all recognize that the number that we're at from a percentage standpoint, percentage of increase, is not where we want to end up. Going forward with a finalized budget to bring in front of the Board of Finance. But we, as I mentioned from the beginning, I felt like it was really important to start the conversation from the broader picture, with all of getting a real sense of what all of the requested items were in this budget, and then sort of moving from that standpoint. So Clarence shared a number of documents with board members in preparation for tonight's meeting, and I'm going to ask him if he would sort of walk us through those, and then we could jump into conversation. John, does that make sense?
I'm on mute. Yes, please. Sounds great.
Thanks. Clarence.
I'm on mute too, so let me let me get off mute and hold on one second. I'm just going to open up this document to make sure. All right, so I'm sharing my screen now. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Key drivers?
Yep.
Okay, hopefully this looks familiar. We had previously talked about some of the components of the slightly over $1 million increase in the 6.39 or 6.4% increase. And just to sort of refresh our memories, we talked about certified salaries and non-certified salaries and what is comprised of the increase. So in the certified salary, we had an increase of $555,955. And we broke that down into existing salaries would just be contractual increases and new positions. So we had roughly 200,000 or 198,000 or for new positions in the budget. So at some point we have the discussion whether they'll stay or go, whatever. The 357,578 is the existing staff contractual increases. So that means if you make any changes there, that means you're eliminating a position or there's a retirement or something that there's a change from the status quo. As we move down to the non-certified, same sort of setup. You've got slightly over $70,000 in increases. Approximately 25 of that is status quo contractual increases. Another 45,000 is new salaries. So those combined, it gets you that 555,955. So that was sort of, we had the discussion about the status quo, knowing our staff is our most vital element, an asset of the district. We want to show you that difference. So as you go down towards the middle of the page, we're showing you if we just had a budget where we just increased this contractual salaries and nothing else, it would be an additional $843,000 between the status quo and what we had previously. The new positions that adds an additional I'm going to round it $245,000. So that to me is an essential question we have to address as you have to address as board members. Are you willing to fund that additional $245,000 in new positions? Down below, we sort of break it out further by adding some things like SPED tuition. Once we add in SPED tuition, we show there the contractual salary increases. Then we add SPED tuition, which is another item which is sort of non-negotiable because we have an obligation to pay a moral, legal, and ethical obligation to pay tuition, out-of-district tuition for our students with special needs. That's an additional right now, when originally budgeted at $382,000. Now we've had some discussions about whether we can adjust that or not, but that's something, another decision the board has to determine whether they're going to what they're going to budget for out-of-district tuition. Because some of those factors are known, and some of them are assumptions we have to make based on available data at this point. Then we added in transportation increases. The transportation increase is our contractual obligations for our general ed bus services and SPED related bus services. So we have two different components of transportation in Easton's pre-K to 12. Typically in a district, you may have athletic, but we don't have high school, so we don't have to worry about that. So it's just getting our kids to and from school and special ed transportation of kids out of district. Then we have some curriculum initiatives that we have discussed and you all have approved in the past, and some new things like math curriculum. Those add some additional funds. So if you add all those things together, you end up with slightly under, you end up with a $658,000 increase, which is basically 60% of that $1 million increase. So the task really is to determine, can we cut anything out of that 60%, or do we have to go somewhere else to find those? And it may be we can get some big ticket items out of the way, or it may be you get down to a very granular level of 10,000 here, 5,000 there, or 1,000. But I think to really move the needle, so to speak, you need to start sort of the big picture items, so that if you take them out, will have significant impact on that variance between this year to propose for next year. So the chairman had asked me to, if you recall, we had, let me move my page down here. We had presented something to you that had looked like this. The chairman asked me to sort of eliminate all the sort of, I'll call it noise at this point, and get down to those things that are sort of significant change. So we went through for both schools and found accounts where there was approximately a $5,000 or more change from this year to next year. So what we're showing you here is those items. I've taken the liberty to highlight in yellow where there's a new FTE, so you can sort of focus in on those. So if you look here, the first one here, this is Helen Keller General Education. We're showing the difference of this year of 1.9 million to just over 2 million. That's a $128,000 difference. But if you look at that yellow line, 72 of that 128 is a new position. So part of your analysis has to figure out, do you retain that new position? Because that's contributing $72,000 to that $128,000 increase. And as we go down, it's sort of the same sort of drill. We're looking at the difference between what we had last year. In some cases, it's significant money. In some cases, it's only $5,000. In some cases, it's $30,000, it's $40,000. But we've set this up so to give you sort of a cheat sheet to where to hone in to find significant dollar amounts to sort of figure this out. I provided this in Excel format for those of you who like to play around with the numbers. Like in my own Excel, I created a delta to show with these difference between this year and next year. And then I backed out if it's a new position to get an idea. So if you wanted to play around, you could do it like that. But the way this is set up, you have Helen Keller, all the major items in Helen Keller, then the major items in Samuel Staples. So I think the concept the chairman had was to give you all an opportunity, sort of a clip notes, so to speak, of going through and finding big ticket items and just go through. So it ends up being Helen Keller is about 4 or 5 pages long. So remember the original document's 80 pages. So you can imagine we've eliminated a few things. There still may be some questions there I hopefully can answer. What I also did, so pages 2 through, I believe, 13 is the summary I talked, 2 through 12 is the summary I talked about. Page 13 gives you particular detail about those new positions. So if you're wondering about where they are and how we got there, this shows you the detail on those new positions. And the last page goes back, and I think I shared this all. This first thing I sent out to the first document, this was sort of a cheat sheet, how I got to some things I thought drove the budget. And some of this is repetitive of what we just showed, but this was that original document I gave you for the large package and tell you where to find it. So I think the chairman's hope was that you as a group, with the help of myself, Dr. Harrison and Stephanie, can sort of talk about how essential certain things are and whether how painful it would be to make those cuts. And I think to get some of those sort of big ticket items out of the way is what I think his hope was, to get started tonight and maybe finish on Thursday. I don't want to speak for the chairman, but I think
I think that's right. I would also say, the intent is that we get a sort of higher fidelity of data and get down to the place where we can see where there's, $50 spent on publications and things like that. We want to have that level of detail for sure as we progress and as the reporting catches up with our needs. But I thought this was a meaningful place to start the conversation. And sorry, go ahead, Bradell. Yeah. So
John, just to jump in, just one piece in between what I shared and then what Clarence shared. So initially, when we talked about the budget increase for the new math program, we had sort of a placeholder number. We were still working on the negotiation for what that final cost would be. We were able to nail down a final cost. And so I think, Clarence, right now is the placeholder is either 60,000 or 80,000.
It's 60,000 in Easton, 80,000 in Reading, 80,000 in Reading. So that's why you have the confusion. It's
so with that 60,000, what the actual cost will be in next year's budget is 29,000.
29,042 and 44 cents.
So that's one sort of right off the top area of savings. We also had some significant discussions about capital improvement requests. And so I was able to follow up with Sue at Helen Keller. There's a number of capital requests on this in this budget, totaling just under about $100,000.
93 and change.
93 and change. And so we've been looking at, just from a more holistic standpoint, what are the potential capital needs beyond these that are requested for Keller, and what's the most appropriate way in addressing those. What I'd like to do is to propose pulling them out of this general operating budget for next year and pulling those capital projects into sort of a wider approach where we could bring in some outside support to help us paint a picture of what all the needs are at Keller and think about a really structured way of addressing some of those needs. And so just in some of the initial work that Clarence has done as in his role as our operations director is to get just a baseline assessment of what some of the building needs are. And we felt like if we address some of the bigger building needs, then some of the smaller things, even down to replacing main office carpet, that there's some interrelation between those pieces, and it would make more sense to pull that out of this budget and address it differently.
Dr. Harrison, right, I'm not sure I understand. You mean just take it out of the budget for this year and try to figure out another way to
yeah. So I realize that sounds more like, and maybe we'll hit the lottery and then we'll do it. I think it's more of when we talk about some of the larger comprehensive needs at Keller, it would make more sense to approach it from a bonding standpoint rather than putting it in an operational budget.
Jenny, if I might, these things were put in the past, you all took them out. The type of work that I think the building needs, it's going to be so significant. If you spent this money, it's all going to get trashed anyway. So why put that, some like the carpet that on that line would get trashed in some of these major projects that I think the building needs. So it makes sense not to spend money on a Band-Aid knowing you need major surgery that needs to occur in the near future anyway.
Yeah, I mean, fully recognize we have kicked the can, down the road on capital improvements at Keller. I feel like it's kind of like the neglected, friend in the corner.
It is.
Because we do. I mean, the reality is we get down to absolutely scraping and having to make choices about, do we replace carpet or do we keep programs and people? And those painful choices and those painful discussions come down to it, and it's not that we don't want the building to be at its best and we don't want to, honor, Sue's requests, but it just comes down to prioritizing. I mean, I think there are a couple of safety concerns that I have on that list. Sometimes we often will go through these capital improvement lists and it's kind of like one at a time, be like, well, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and kind of do what we can and look to see what is maybe not absolutely essential and can be put down the line. I mean, gym padding came up, for example, last year. And the idea of 2 walls being padded and 2 walls not being padded just sounds preposterous to me. Especially the ones that are behind the backboard where a kid is going to slam their head, face into the wall if they come down hard from a rebound. And then stair treads. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, we need to address places where kids are going to trip. So I don't want to completely wash this whole section away without making sure that we address safety concerns and correct me if I'm wrong, fellow board members, but is there some possibility of addressing some of these concerns with unexpended funds at the end of the current school year?
Jenny, that's my plan to try to get some of these things done this year, but like the treads are coming up because of the structural issues of the building. So even if you do replace them, they're going to come up again in the future. So that's just putting a Band-Aid. It's not solving the problem. The padding's a different issue. I'd like to see if we can get done that this year. That is a clear, and present danger of the kids in the gym class. But the treads is part of the problem that we have issues with the floor and external moisture getting in. So that tread problem won't go away. We can replace it, but we haven't solved the source of the problem.
But I guess I would say we need to do both. Like, I don't want to leave an open, unsafe situation because we know that there's a larger issue at hand. It still needs to be safe for operating the school.
Right. The custodial staff is doing a great job trying to identify those tripping hazards, and it's not something you'd like to see, but quite honestly, if you walk around the building, I was there last week with an outside vendor, they're making very effective use of duct tape. And I know that'd be shocking, but they're actually keeping things down with duct tape because that's the only way they can keep the tripping hazards down. So that's not ideal, but that's how they're managing right now, because the tiles are popping up, the stair treads are coming up. We've got to find ways that, temporarily solve it, but you don't want to spend large dollars if you truly plan to fix the source of the problem, because you're going to rip it up within 12 to 18 months, and we can find a less expensive temporary solution.
Jenny, you might remember that I think it was 2 years ago, there were a lot of tiles that were popping up, and it has to do with the water table that the school sits on. And so there were a lot of those tiles were changed out, but it didn't really address the problem of the water table underneath the school. So I think there is going to be an opportunity, because you've got Staples that is going to need a new roof here in the not too distant future. The Staples parking lot certainly needs work, and then you look at the Keller roof, and of course Keller was built in 3 different stages, and certainly not at the same time. So there's some major capital improvements that are going to have to happen. And to Rydell's point, I think it's probably going to be a bonding issue that is going to help us get there.
Mr. Chair, I'll bring your attention to this service contract for maintenance to HVAC system. This is a new item. I think it's necessary and needed, but I'll just point out it is a new item for $12,000. So other things here are pre-existing, but there is a new item there. They do need that. This would put the Easton schools on par of what we're doing in Reading, but I have a fiduciary duty to let you know that is a new item for $12,000 that you may want to take a look at.
Yep. It just back on the capital items. What is the recommendation? If it's at 93,441, what would the recommendation be? That it's 0 or that it's?
I would probably ask for maybe $15,000 to $20,000 to deal with the Band-Aids. It can't be 0 because we can't.
Yep.
But I would ask for 15 to 20 to just try to, keep the ship afloat until we can get to a permanent solution.
Okay. 15, I heard.
I guess you didn't hear the 20.
What? You're cutting out. I think you're going into a tunnel.
17. Split the difference.
All right, Jeff. I don't know whose side you're on here.
He's a giver tonight.
Well, while we're choosing sides, there was and I'll need to have Jen Del Conte jump in. There was a request for a behavioral tech that was $29,000 in the budget, and I think Jen was saying that because of some changes in the special ed department, that is no longer needed. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jen, but I think that's what I heard.
I'm very comfortable removing the request for a behavior tech at Helen Keller, given the circumstance and outcome of the recent PPT meeting.
Okay, so that's $29,208. But let me ask this, because on the 138 line, and this is on page 2, Clarence, if you want to roll back to that. And on page 2, 138, it goes 5 basis behavioral techs from 112, an increase of 1. But that total expense was $67,978. And if you divide the 5 people into that, it's $13,000. So I just want to check and make sure that we have the right number here, because if a behavioral tech is almost 30 and we have 4 of them, then this number is way low.
Hold on one second. I can tell you exactly. Let me pull up my other sheet here. So behavior techs, non-certified.
Right, it's 138 in your
So
on your special ed scorecard.
So Jeff, we've got some different prices based on, I guess, years of service because they have different hourly rates, but we have them all in here. So that number, remember when we split things up, some of them are in different account codes. The note may be referring because we was all in one place, so the note may be thrown off a little bit, but all the salaries, they're in there. They may not be in the spot we're looking for, but they're all in the budget. So we'll find that 29 where it was supposed to be and then remove that.
Okay. So the 138 will be 4 basis behavior techs.
Yes, I believe so. I just got to confirm with Jen. That's the location she intended for that one. I assume it is, but I just want to confirm that.
Okay. Maintenance contracts. Clarence, you mentioned that, and that there's a new maintenance contract for service contract for maintenance of the HVAC system for 12 grand.
Yes.
We also have a heating and cooling management request for 9,100, which is on page 3, it's at the bottom of page 3. And then on page 4, we have a $2,663 one for again, mechanical contract for heating and air conditioning. It seems like it's 3 separate dollar amounts, all speaking to the same issue.
It's not, Jeff. One is BMS systems, one is actual mechanical systems. They're all 3 separate things, but they're all related to heating and cooling. But one's BMS, one is boiler related. So they're all 3 different things. I had that same question. We did confirm they're all 3 separate things.
Okay.
And the service contract, that new item that you called our attention to, this would give us the ability to have real sort of meaningful, quick response and accountability.
Exactly. So, like if we don't have this contract and something happens, we're just sort of waiting around for a technician to come. But if you have the service contract, you're to the top of the priority list. I'll just give an example. This doesn't apply to Easton, but we had a radiator leak at Reading Elementary today.
Right.
And they have one of these contracts. And guess what? The vendor showed up within an hour of us calling it. If we have a situation without a contract, we're literally at the mercy of when they'll get to us, because they're obviously, as a business, they're going to take care of their quote unquote loyal customers. So it's a risk question, just sort of like we talked about with funding somewhere. What's your risk profile? You willing to risk the system won't break down and you'll need service, or do you want to pay for the insurance to know you'll have it covered if something happens?
All right, thank you.
Clarence, under your cleaning and repairs, we've got again another sizable increase, but the total amount is 56,766. What have we spent year to date?
I'd have to look that up, Jeff. I'm not certain. Jeff, I think one of the big issues, one of the big drivers is that roof and gutter repair.
That's 15 grand. That's a big number.
That's sort of the sort of big driver there.
Well, does that fall into the same category as perhaps the discussion about bonding?
Right.
Yeah, for me, yes. But when I was at the building last week, the head custodian acknowledged he had one roof leak right now he's dealing. He said they pop up here and there, but that would be a discussion for the bonding. The head custodian told me he joined the school 8 years ago, and at some point, someone roofed. So you got another whatever number of years, and that was 12. So we're 12, 13 years beyond what that roofer said. So it definitely is a new roof there. So I think that would be under the bonding category.
Okay. Yeah. No. The roof needs significant work.
So is that 15 though? Is that urgent repairs that have to happen right now, regardless of whether or not the sort of bond happens, or is that, hey, this would be a part of new roof work?
I think the 15 is, hey guys, we spring leaks on a regular basis, and the head custodian want to have money to take care of the leaks if he spring up. Will it cost 15? We don't know, but it's just.
Yeah,
he deals with leaks, so you might be able to trim it, but you need to leave something there because he will have leaks.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's just that all of these cleaning and repair, it's 56,766, and and that's a teacher.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Well, look,
so I
put
look
it
at
this way.
this and
You're
say,
paying 48 now, so
Right.
the increase is really $8,000 increase because you've got 48 in the budget now.
well, yeah, I see that, but again, that's why I wanted to know what our actual
Jeff, I
expenditures
will try to get that information more, but I don't have it handy.
I got it. No, again,
Or-
that could be something we do for
And-
Thursday.
I think that's right. And if we did, I personally would say if we were able to keep that flat by taking the 15 and taking it down to, 9 and then finding some other spot, then that would be nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would defer to you all on that call, but my point is just to point it out to you as something to consider.
Yep. Thank you.
I don't want to dominate this, but
Can I jump in for a quick sec, Jeff?
sure, please.
It's not necessarily about any one specific item. And it definitely goes to growing pains and changes in format, and having looked at this for a number of years in a certain way. And I think I've mentioned this before. The piece that's really missing for me is seeing the change in percentage as we discuss these things. And
Yep.
again, I mean absolutely no disrespect to the current people doing the absolutely hard work right now, but at this point in the process, I'm looking for, sort of an itemized ticking down
Yep.
towards lower percentages determined by our administrators as sort of the least destructive path of reduction.
Yep.
And I'm feeling right now like we're kind of it feels like a little bit like Groundhog Day to me. Like we're at our second or third budget meeting, and I feel like we're kind of looking at the same information again, maybe presented in a different document, but that the forward progress of our administration, and I mean, I hear some in movement in, yes, we talked about the bonding process and looking at these things, but what I'm wanting to see is we think that we can, take this out and that would bring you to this percentage. We can take this out and that would bring you to this percentage. Sort of like, I think Tom used to talk about it kind of like a path. He would lay out a path for us from say 6% to 2%. And, his recommendation or the administration's recommendation in how to get there, like this is the first and least corrosive cut they would make, and then followed by this and this and this and this. And he would sort of alert us to the point at which he felt like we were really cutting in and causing damage to our overall educational offering. So we can keep talking about all of these things, but as a board member and a community member, that's really what I'm looking for.
Jenny, may I respond? What you're describing is what I call a waterfall. It's sort of cascading down, and that's what I would typically do. The issue I personally have here is when the budget first got presented, the first thing I was going to cut was the proposed fourth grade teacher, because I was like, well, you don't need an extra fourth grade teacher.
Clarence, can I stop you right there, please, and ask you not to make reference to guys in a manner like that?
No,
So-
my point is, I say I didn't realize the community's
Prioritization of that.
So prior
Right.
to not knowing that, it just would have been my natural reaction. That's why I haven't sort of imposed my perception of the way things should be, because the community has certain values, which I'm learning about what they hold important. So once I learned that, I haven't talked about the fourth grade teacher
Yep.
since.
Well,
So-
I think confusion for me also is sort of understand there's a real shift here for us in kind of the roles and responsibilities in central office too. Like this discussion is typically driven by the superintendent and the administrators, and we're typically hearing from them about educational and programming and curricular and faculty decisions. So that participation, that typical participation from that facet of our, what's the word I'm looking for, our leadership, I think is I'm not hearing that at this point.
So,
I'm looking for that. I'm looking to hear more from our principals and the superintendent about where they see that path going.
Yeah, I would also absolutely invite our administrators and our school leaders, please do not feel like you cannot participate wholeheartedly in this this process. I would say, I think what we were just involved in and those, frankly, only 3 things that we touched on, that was $136,107. And I think having that as a clear sort of part of our process that we're going through, that's kind of on the screen would help. I'm kind of just throwing it into an Excel as we go. But that's a pretty significant amount of money. And I think it started with Dr. Harrison pointing out the difference in the math, and then getting into what I would say is that sort of some of the appropriate sort of venues for Clarence to jump in on some of the sort of operational and sort of the capital projects, with Dr. Harrison mentioning the bonding and sort of Jeff jumping in there, behavioral tech. I think the process we're doing, while I think we have been talking about these same numbers for a while, if we continue to do this, I think we've already, in just 3 points, found significant sort of reductions in what we might go forward with. And that's sort of without us even getting into any controversial conversations about whether we believe that the media specialist is essential or not. And I think, to your point, Jenny, Dr. Harrison should, and Dr. Pearson, you all should absolutely be at the forefront of those conversations, helping us to assess, the sort of significance of any reductions in those spaces. Does that make sense? Is that sort of consistent with the, sort of where you want us to go?
I just want us to get there.
Yeah, I do too. I do too.
So well, I got another big number that we can talk about, but I'm sorry, Rydell, excuse me.
Well, I was going to say, I'd like for us to finish up the conversation on positions, because again, I mean, that's where those are our biggest ticket items. Those are our biggest budget drivers. So looking at either new positions or the restoration of positions. So, in talking with our principals, and, I invite them to jump in as well. I mean, I think as far as our new positions, our greatest priority is the additional 4th grade teacher. I think that is very much driven by our enrollment. I think that we've already established, a real strong need for that position. And then I think from there, the next kind of focus area would be the library media specialist. I think that there's 2 ways to look at this. That there is that position would play a significant role in working in tandem with the director of digital learning and technology, and really moving forward the focus on student-centered learning and really our whole technology initiative. That will play a significant role. I think that some of the work that the technology advisory committee did in laying out goals over 3 years, and talking about sort of the human capital needs. The first on there was to make sure that we had the director position really guiding the work. And I think that next tier would be the library media specialist. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that you could make a really strong argument for the need for that position this year. If it was something that it made more sense to delay that to next year, I could see a path forward for that. However, I think that this would really be a discussion of, instead of a discussion of, do we need a middle school library media specialist? The bigger question is, when do we need it? And so, I mean, what I would be looking for, as part of that conversation, is that we prioritize the position. If we say, that as far as the larger picture of where we're headed with technology and with digital learning, and student-centered learning, we can make the decision that that's a year 2 part of the plan versus a year one part of the plan. But I think that it would be that it's a really necessary position given the direction that we're heading in. Those would be of our new positions. Those would be the two what I would say are the primary positions. And again, when we're talking about dollar amounts and potential impact, we're looking at between those two positions close to $160,000, right? No, 100
just south of 150. Yeah,
150.
Yep.
And so you know, we could talk then from there. Sort of the next tier of positions would be that social worker position. So we've made a really good argument for the need for continued mental health support for our students. As Sue mentioned in the work that they're doing at Keller, that social worker would not just be working with students who have social work support needs built into their IEPs, but with gen ed students as well, just based on the ongoing needs that they're seeing at the school. So I think that's sort of the prioritization of those positions. Obviously, Jen already talked us through the basis, that additional basis teacher coming out. And then that leaves really the one position to discuss would be the PE paraeducator. You know, and I think that if we're looking at all four of these positions on a nice to have versus essential, I think that the way that they are sort of ranked here on the screen would be sort of the order of ranking that to me would make sense.
They're in that order for a reason.
Jeff?
Well, the library media specialist, I mean, we just, you know, we've just agreed to bring on a director of digital learning. And who's going to be the key person to execute the plan for Helen Keller has got to be someone with that level of sophistication.
Yep.
I don't know how we cannot have the library media specialist. That's something that, especially with all that's going on with COVID and all the work that's going to have to be done to help kids catch up. We're going to need feet on the street, so to speak, at Keller that's going to be able to help from a digital learning perspective. I certainly understand the fourth grade teacher. I was just looking at the numbers, and I don't know how we can not do that either. So, right. The social worker, I think that's nice to have. I think the top two are needs to have.
Yeah, I have to agree with Jeff. I mean, the numbers are clear for grade 4. It's also a year where kids are going to come out of, it's just such a pivotal year. So I think we have to have that. I still can't believe we didn't have a library media specialist this year. So I think it's an essential, especially with the school building being open, kids being able to gather. If the library is not open, it's just such an important space. And with the new director of technology, I would also argue the social worker is essential. I think we're going to have a lot more mental health needs, and it's just, if we don't pay for it now, we're going to pay for it later, in my opinion. So I think it's a worthwhile expense.
Well, Devin, one other point about the fourth grade teacher, that is a master's step 11. That is pretty high up the food chain. There certainly could be a savings if we went to a step 5. Or maybe even a step 4, that's going to be 15 grand right there, I would think.
And Jeff,
I have to go look at my list, but I think that's about right.
That sounds right.
Jeff, you're right. And I invite Kim to jump into this as well. So part of the reason why we put that in as a budget number is that we had a potential teacher in mind for that position. So we wanted to make sure that the that we were being, that was reflected in the budget ask, rather than putting in a low number and then,
Right. Okay.
hiring higher and trying to figure it out. Sue, Kim, am I correct in
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, you are. She did a long-term sub-assignment in grade 4 and is currently a long-term sub-assignment in grade 5. Mr. Brownstein and I have observed her multiple times. She's really extraordinary, very talented. And I agree very much with what Devin just said. Given the interruptions that we've had since last spring, given the assessments going forward being more high stakes at the elementary level, I think it's critically important to have someone that's experienced and strong. And this teacher has proven herself to be just that.
Well, and she also knows the kids, right? I mean, she's in the building. She understands the culture in the building, and that goes a long way.
Yeah, and especially if you already have high quality talent lined up, there's you got to go for that.
I'm sorry, John.
No, go ahead.
With a lot of teaching programs now incorporating the masters and student teaching, I mean, 10, 11 years might sound like a lot, but it really is not that far.
I'm sorry, Jen, I can't hear you.
I can hear you fine. I don't know. Maybe
up a little. I was just saying that with teacher preparation programs, often including the masters in student teaching at this point, that a master's +5 or +10 is not, you're not bringing in somebody who's been around a tremendous amount of time, or they're really just at a very, very solid level of experience, but still with a tremendous amount of growth, upward. And then I think everything we've heard, library media specialist, I mean, we need to discuss it, but I hope we don't have to discuss it too much more. And for the social worker, I mean, if it's in there, to me, that's a sign that we're already pushing the limits of what's necessary for staffing in that area. And I can't imagine that need is going to go down after what everybody's going through. And the thing for the 4th grade teacher, and just in all issues of transparency, I have a child that's going to be in 4th grade next year. So this certainly I want, the best for, my family and others, but it speaks to me more about stability of our staff. We're at so many years now of shuffling people around and taking, one person and moving them ahead or behind of a smaller cohort. And if we can reach a level of stability in our staffing, we're always talking about student outcomes and, what are the X factors in seeing growth, and a stable faculty and teams of teachers who have time to work and gel together is so, so important. And I think we just have to give them that chance to do their best work for us.
And trained. And during that time, well trained.
So the one thing I would say about the social worker position, and I was giving this some thought, particularly after we got news that we were receiving the ESSER 2 funds, basically the coronavirus relief funds related to recovery, that this could be an area. So this would relate to one of the 4 areas that we could potentially focus resources on related to student well-being and mental health. Those funds are, as I mentioned at the top of the meeting, are temporary. And so they're really for these small gaps of recovery. So what are the resources, whether that's materials, technology, or even people resources that we might need on a short-term basis? When I look at sort of the shift of the needs of middle school students, just in general, so not just specific to Helen Keller, but just middle school students in general, there is a growing need for additional mental health support. So while I could, sort of make an argument that this is potentially just a response to COVID, that there's this need for now, I don't think that that's really the case. And Sue, I'd really invite you to jump into the conversation, but based on discussions that I've had with administration, that this sounds like it's going to be a need that persists, that we'd want to have that additional support in the building. So while, you know, fiscally, you can make a good argument like, hey, just for now, let's just sort of plug in this other money to, you know, to hire this 0.5 for a short period of time. But I think that what we're seeing is that we anticipate this being sort of an ongoing need and better positioning our schools to be resourced our students need. Sue, what are your thoughts?
Thank you. I did unmute a little bit ago because I've been ready to contribute to this conversation. The number is high because the person we have in place is a half-time person, is a phenomenal resource who's been with us for many years. So keep that in mind. Similar to at Staples with the sub that Kim described, this is a person who knows our school very, very well, and we know her very well. So it's a higher price tag, but she's worth that amount of money. What I didn't mention in my opening statement, which I could have, is we already have an increase in 504 plans created for specifically for new anxiety-related diagnoses. The number is a little bit alarming. In the last few months, it's an increase of over 5 students. I think it's 5 or 6 students. Don't have that paper in front of me at the moment. And I'm very relieved to hear Rydell say that maybe some of that funding could be used towards this for next year, at least as a way to make it happen, and then maybe permanently put it in later on if we still need it. But I absolutely would like to advocate. I absolutely, you know, my feelings about the media center specialists being being restored. So it's a really, really, I agree with everything that's been said, but absolutely want to advocate to try to preserve that from being reduced.
I also wanted to chime in for a minute too, that the social worker also provides mandated IEP services as well. I think that has to be factored in. And also, if you look at the caseload, the number of students that are moving from Staples to Keller and that have IEPs for next year, it is high. I mean, it's we project to have 14 students moving from Samuel Staples to Helen Keller, and I believe most of those students have at least 2 to 3 counseling sessions, and we're only losing 12. So again, we're already seeing an uptick on counseling being as part of the IEPs now.
Is this something that can be spoken to with the IDEA grant?
You mean the 611 and the 619 grant? We already put a significant amount of, we already
no, those are noted in the budget, but we have other IDA grant money. Could that, and obviously these things are very specific in terms of where, you know, where they can be placed, but is this something that grant, the other grant money could be used for?
Well, in terms of the 611 and 619, we do have some flexibility on, you know, different categories of how we use that money. I will say that we use a significant portion of that to offset the staffing cost, but at the same time, you know, we have assistive technology requests. You know, we also so we also have to cost share with Easton Country Day. You know, that's because we're within our jurisdictional boundaries. So
I just want to make sure that we open every door and see if some of this other grant money that is,
I can appreciate
that has been you know, brought to light here is being used in a way that could help make this happen. Speaking of special ed, can I have one? I mean, I'm dying here. Please. Helen Keller, 563. Not yet finalized outplacements. Not yet finalized outplacements. Excuse me. 195,400. It's on page 2, Clarence. The note outplacements are 130, and we understand that. But we've been talking a little bit back and forth, Jen and I, about about the not yet finalized for 195. And I know you said there's been some movement and some change, and I wonder if that's a number that we can significantly drop.
I think we can reduce that. I mean, again, just as with the behavior technician position, we have ongoing PPT meetings, and we did recently have PPT meetings from the last meeting, since the last board meeting. So I do believe that we can reduce that. If you give me a minute, I can find my notes.
How does reducing it by 150 sound? I want to find the money for the 4th grade teacher and the media specialist.
I can make a recommendation here. I think, we've gone around a lot of areas tonight, and I think what I would ask is that the administration, the folks that are that own those segments, bring revised numbers, and maybe Clarence got to do this, I'm not sure, but bring the revised numbers to Thursday session. So,
yeah,
because we already knew going into tonight it wasn't $1,000,001, I think, based on things that have transpired. But I think it would be immensely helpful to progress tonight to Thursday to have that.
Yeah, and I want to let Jeff get back to his line, but yes, I would fully agree with that, Randy. And I would ask that we have an opportunity, maybe after Jeff is done exploring this, to go through the list and say, Clarence, Rydell, Stephanie, Sue, Kim, can you flag for us anything else that you say, maybe take a look at that, maybe took a look, and then we can walk away with that and we can consider. And so we show up on Thursday and we say, I did look at these things. Here's my position on that or that.
And that's great, because when Jeff or anybody else is done, I've got a couple of things that are those types of flags. So
perfect.
Yep.
Perfect. Jeff, sorry, floor's yours.
No, that's okay. I'm waiting for Jen's input.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Mr. Chair, while we're waiting for Jen, obviously, whatever we decide to do for that account, that 563 is $175,000 increase. Not 175, $175,000 increase. So the question is, Mr. Parker talked about 150, which would be somewhat aggressive, but some happy medium, I think, would give me some comfort at night when I know that something becomes finalized, having the money there to deal with it.
Yep, of course.
Hold on a minute.
Clarence, I like aggressive.
So what I'd like to do as far as this not yet finalized, given that we have the conversation coming back on Thursday, I'd like for Jen not to make a quick decision and then
That's
have
fine. That's fine.
Good.
And be able to come back on Thursday.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
that sounds perfectly reasonable. There were okay. So I'm sorry, Randy, you had a couple of other items you wanted to track.
Yeah, I'm just trying to double check and make sure we haven't hit some of them already, but we're going to talk about extracurricular at some point. I think we can all agree it needs to be in the system. I've been a proponent in years past of making it a sort of a pay to play akin to what we do with the ski club. I don't know. And maybe, I'm not sure Sue has this tonight, but maybe she could bring it for Thursday. How many kids historically have participated in the 24 clubs? How many kids have participated in ski club for instance? I want to say ski club is $200 or $300 per person. Obviously that's an expensive sport as opposed to a Frisbee club or what have you, but, and not to equate the two, but, if we had head count, and you looked at the stipend, would it be, $40 for a kid to do Frisbee club for instance? And is that asking too much of the community to do? But, so that's just one topic for Thursday. Electricity. Clarence, Clarence, what is going on? We put more solar panels in and we pay twice as much for electricity. Can we get rid of the solar panels?
You can do whatever you like,
Please.
Randy, but I wouldn't advise. Look, Randy, as we talked about, I think yesterday, and some of the consultants, one of the that we talked about for the central office, one of them I'm trying to bring in is an energy consultant to take a look at both oil, gas, water, electricity, and what they do is they provide you projections of what you should be budgeting based on the market rate of the utility you're getting and your consumption. Right now, we're just sort of in the blind. So it's interesting. The installer of the solar panel, I think I have a meeting with them later on this week. They're trying to propose some new deals. So I will have some serious conversations about verifying the data that they, I guess, promised you guys a few years back about what kind of savings you would have. So I'll be looking to see that. But unfortunately, at this point, Randy, it's just sort of, we're speculating on, based on the, our consumption, what it will be, and we need to get some intel on the rate for electricity production and transmission to come up with a better number. So that's our sort of best guess at this point.
Okay, but I'm pretty sure I saw like a 25% increase. And if we're spending 25% more on electricity, something's wrong. But I'll defer to Thursday or a month from Thursday, we get that figured out. But that can't be right. At least I hope not. Let's see, we talked about HVAC. I know we've got some, technology purchases in the buildings between Chromebooks and things like that. I know we got a lot of those, leading into the whole shutdown. So I'm hoping that we can curtail those and make it a nominal if we need any of those.
And I think, sorry, I just want to tell you, I think a lot of that was coming out of Helen Keller, where they were being refreshed. I would ask if Sue can come on Thursday with the refresh schedule, or if somebody from central office should come with that. Like how many do we have in total? What's the lifespan of these things? Let's just sort of see that laid out, because the story may tell itself. We all may go, oh, okay, so we did need to refresh these, or it may say, actually, we can refresh a lot less.
Didn't Sue speak to this the last time?
Right, but we didn't have the refresh schedule, right? She definitely touched on that issue, but just sort of seeing it in how many do we have? What's the lifespan? Sort of where are we at in the cycle? And if we're doing this right, I think we end up with every year, here's how many we're going to be refreshing. But there's no reason why we shouldn't know that now.
Well, Mr. Chairman, one of the things that your new proposed Director of Digital Learning would probably be under their auspices to develop that plan, since that position is now not filled. That's why you don't have it. I'll just call your attention. You're up about $22,000. If you compare the amount in 732 on the screen, the 20,777 down to the 42 and 736. As you remember, we transferred accounts, so you're up about $22,000. So somewhere in there, it may be some of these, particularly that one first year of a quote, that's $4,000. That's new. If it's a first year of a 3-year quote, and that's E-rate, so you really can't take that out, because that's a sort of a government program. But there's some other things in there. So somewhere in that line of 736 is you get that 22,000's coming in. It's probably that. If I look at that student iPad cart refresh, iPads tend to be expensive. That's 9,000 right there. Mm-hmm. You get the staff computer replacements. That's another 10. So that's 19 grand. Those two line items right there. That, to your point about the refresh schedule.
Yeah.
Well, I just that we, as part of our COVID reimbursement, we got hundreds. Well, I don't want to make it sound more than what it was, but well over 100 Chromebooks, which I think, if you're talking about refreshing, well, if you're going to do 30 a year and we were gifted 100 or 150 or 200, I think we're probably pretty well set for the short term anyway.
All right, we got two other brief things. We're doing the new math. I don't want to call it curriculum, but the new math program. I would, and every year, I know we hammer professional development and other curriculum development, whatever, but given what we're spending on math, across I guess basically it's same as Staples right now, I would ask Stephanie to take a look at the overall curriculum spend because it's up double digits, and see if we can't bring that in closer to the 3 or 4% that we're going to be very fortunate to get as a budget. I mean, one of the things that Board of Finance looks at is, the outliers of, if they're going to give us X percent an increase, what's 2 and 3 and 4X that, and they may get down to $500 here and there because they'll see something that went from 500 to 1,000 and go, oh my gosh, you're spending 100% more. So I'll just throw that to Stephanie. And the last thing is, one of the things that we generally have at our disposal and or we share with the Board of Finance is sort of a total head count of our population of teachers and paras and such, and then the student population, because they're a big fan of pointing out that our high water mark was a dozen years ago as far as students, and yet we go up every year, or we have in certain years, 1, 2, or 3 bodies in the district, even though, we've been fortunate the last few years, our student population's been relatively flat, and maybe it ticked up a little bit this year by, 10 or 15 kids. But so just a total head count vis-a-vis a total student count, is something to be prepared with.
Clarence, that is called the Hansen Report, HANSSEN, and Vicky can help you with that.
I think she may dispute what's the title of it, Mr. Parker, but hey, Randy, on the point about curriculum, I think one thing you got to realize, one thing embedded in the curriculum is your DEI initiative. That's one of the parts of the increase that's in there. So that's an initiative you all committed to, and that's reflected in that curriculum increase.
So, I've been making a list of all the things that we want to follow up in conversation on Thursday. So on Thursday, we'll talk more about the not yet finalized that line, and just talking about what's the most appropriate cut to make to that line. We'll take a look at extracurriculars and talk with Sue just about the number of students that we have. And considering the pay to play, I think that might be sort of a good option of even if we don't do that sort of across the board with all clubs, it may be make sense to do that with some. The electricity, just taking another look at that and making sure that number aligns with where we need it to be. Technology purchases, and I know we were specifically talking at Helen Keller, but we had a really productive conversation in Reading about technology purchases and refreshing around Chromebooks when we had that discussion across both schools. And I think that would be helpful for us to do between now and Thursday. As Clarence mentioned, a good portion of the curriculum work is related to the DEI focus, and know that Stephanie spoke to that some already, but maybe we could just break that out a little bit more and bring some clarity to that. And then the last is making sure that we have the head count of students and staff. What I will also do is in the same way that I prioritized what our positions, what makes most sense with the prioritization of positions, just as far as where we're going. I'll take the list of kind of the bigger ticket items now that we've sort of already done that prioritization around positions, but do that next tier and have sort of that same conversation to paint the picture of at what point do we start cutting, or at what point do changes then start to make significant programmatic differences for our students that I believe wouldn't get us the outcomes that we want them to have, and really getting down to that point. I think that would be a good use of our time and discussion on Thursday as well.
Rydell, could you add one thing? I just added up the curriculum work, other professional services for both schools, and it's $67,450. And embedded in that is DEI revisions. We're talking, so I don't know how much of this 67 is dedicated to DEI or or other things. But I think we're putting the cart before the horse to say that we need $67,000 for DEI revisions when we haven't even launched a survey to understand if there's even, or launched a survey to even figure out what the level of need is.
Sure. And Jeff, what we could do as part of that conversation, I'll have Stephanie talk a little bit more about that, because I think that even though we're talking about a lot of things sort of under the broader umbrella of diversity, equity, and inclusion,
Right.
Obviously this is talking about some of the curriculum work, where the survey might be getting more at sort of student experiences or perception data. Which gives us a real good picture of where we could go, but not every situation is solved with, through the lens of curriculum development. So I think that'll give us a better picture of that discussion will give us a better picture of how the intent of how to use that money, and really, it's really just some ongoing work. And as you all know this, that the curriculum development work, that cycle is sort of ongoing. And so I know that Stephanie could speak with more detail to that.
Good. Is there anything else that we should make sure that we're touching on Thursday, or that we would ask our administrators, building leaders to touch on?
Actually, I would just like to just kind of circle back a little bit to the not yet finalized outplacements. I just finished looking through my notes while the conversations were happening. This goes back to the 563 line, and I also looked at our PPT meetings that we had recently. So right now we have 195,400 in that line, based on conversations I've had with families and with staff. I would be very comfortable reducing that to 50,000. So that should be somewhat of a significant reduction in that line. So, I mean, I just looked through all my notes, so I would be very comfortable making that reduction.
Okay.
Question,
And
will we discuss the PE para? Because John, correct me, I'm up to almost $290,000.
I got 281,507.
All right, I got 289 because I'm probably doing things that I didn't tell you about, but
Throw that off the boat.
I'm
Wait,
sure you'll take my number over your number.
I don't know.
Do we include the PE para?
No.
Okay.
I thought I had that on my list for discussion, as well as the bases. So I have, the things that we've already talked about, as well as PE, para, extracurriculars, not yet finalized, electricity, technology purchases, curriculum basis, teacher, or head count of students and staff, and other professional services as all topics. Is there anything else that we're missing from that list, or anything that we want to ask administrators to sort of prepare, so be ready to speak to?
No, I just want to be clear. You're not taking out the PE para at this point. We're just
No. I mean, it's not in my math. Like it's just a thing to discuss, and for Thursday, and that we would ask Sue to be ready to talk about.
The only staff reduction I have in my math is the behavior tech. I don't have anything else confirmed.
I have the same.
Okay, I'll nothing on this. I think we're good with what we've. I guess I'm going back to Clarence's comment about the waterfall, or in the old G capital vernacular, a walk. What do we want the administration to prepare as it relates to that?
Well, so I actually don't like the way that the process worked before, and I know I'm one member of a multi-member board. I prefer what we're doing here now, that we're having the conversation in the open, where the public can see it and can participate in it, and we have the opportunity to discuss. I feel a little bit like the process of the past gave me whiplash of, wait, that's just happened and we didn't really dig in on that. And what did that mean? I like sort of what we're doing here. So from my perspective, just everything that we've listed, knowing where's the starting point, what's in the budget as of right now, And if people show up and they say, I've looked at that and I think we could reduce electricity by X amount, great. On the other side of that, we've all stated we plan to bring that up. So, it's certainly the prerogative of the administration to say, here's a list of 15 more things that you didn't ask about or that did come from your list that we think we could reduce and get down to X, Y, or Z. But I wouldn't ask them to say, show us what it takes to get to 2%.
No, that's not what I was asking. I was asking more of the former, which you just said, but
okay.
That's fine. I mean, listen, I think I hear what you're saying, and I think there was some of that, or potentially some of that. I never felt I didn't know where the cuts were or what they were, but I could see how other people may not have felt that way. And I think last year was your first year going through the budget, so that would create whiplash just in general. So, but in any event, that's fine. I mean, this is an iterative process, right? So we're going to go through we're going to go round and round with this a few more times. So,
Mr. Chairman, if I might, to Jenny's request, what I will do, I'm going to create a quick little document with a starting point of what our original amount, and then I'm going to show each sort of cascading remove the math down to 29,000, what that looks like percentage wise, and then show it so as we're going down, so to help Jenny and anyone else who would like to see that. So right now I have the math reduction. I have the capital budget being reduced down to, I think the last time I heard was 17.5. I have the behavior tech. I personally have talked about the reducing the roof down from 15K to 5K. And then I had Jen's reduction not yet realized from 195 to 50. So that's 100, that's 145 there.
That's correct.
So basically I was going to show each one of those change and show what the total and then the percentage, that way to address some of Jenny's concern, to help her with what we've done. And then anything else we add, we'll just add to that.
And you're at 291,507 in savings?
I'm at on my little, let's see, iPhone, I'm at 289 something, I believe.
I got 291,507 if including.
All right, well, let me give you 20 more. This is Samuel Staples. It's on page 4, I believe, 112 and 130.
Hold on, Jeff.
12 and 130 on Samuel Staples.
112 and 130. What's the function, Jeff?
Well, it doesn't say.
The pink across the top would be the function.
Technology plan.
Okay, thank you. That helps me. There you go.
There you go. Okay, you've got at 112, you've got a halftime.
Before you go any further, there's not 20 for you to take off there. I can tell you what the difference is. For some reason in our current year budget, the technology assistance you see as 1.0 are listed as 0.5. I don't know why that is, but what you're seeing is them listing as 1.0. So that's the difference. I don't know why they're listed at 0.5 in this year's budget. So I confirmed the numbers. That 37,886 is 0.5 of our network administrator, and the 36,257 is 1.0 of technology assistant. What's showing up in the previous year of 54, that technology assistant was listed as a 0.5. I wasn't here for that, so I don't know why it is, but that is an accurate amount.
That's a shame.
Sorry to disappoint you.
Yeah, that is the one benefit of dealing with a migration that doesn't go perfectly, is you get to know the numbers really well. So that was pretty impressive.
And Clarence, you got the new math program, which was originally 60 and is now 29 and change, right?
Correct. Yeah, I have that as 29,042.44.
All right, I'm done.
Can I make one more request, Clarence, because you're so good at this?
Sure.
When you build that cascading thing that you were just talking about, is it possible, like during the Thursday meeting, as we suggest cuts, to like keep that up and just have a live showing the new percentage? I'm at a 4.68 total increase right now, I think.
That's
and just like it would be nice to see.
Technology. So yeah, I can easily do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can share your screen. Awesome.
You're asking me to pull back the curtain from the Wizard of Oz, but I can do that.
Well, that's actually the spreadsheet that I built while we were talking, Devin. So I have that too. I'll send what I have, and Clarence can make it better.
Perfect. Yeah, I figured somebody, I mean, I was kind of built it, but it's not as good as yours. So,
John, I just want to respond to what you're saying about, the way the things that were done in the past and sort of, the whiplash. I mean, obviously, your experience is your experience. But what I'm talking about, I think is infinitely helpful. And it's something that we need when we're presenting things to the community and we're presenting to the Board of Finance. I think we need as a board to see that cascade and be able to, for each of us to identify at which point we say, no, that's my line, I'm not comfortable going beyond that because it then starts to impact X, Y, and Z and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
It's not about things happening without the public viewing it. For me, it's like, let's just look at this in a really stepped way. And I don't want to say predetermined, but I find it incredibly valuable to see where the administration and where central office, how they would arrive at reductions if they were necessary.
Yeah, I think
and that we can make informed decisions based on those reductions. Like, because some of this discussion, although it's valuable, does sometimes feel like it's sort of circular. I mean, I do think we made a lot of progress tonight, but sometimes it does feel like it's discussion, but personally would prefer to see something more concrete, informed by the people who are impacted by the reductions.
Yeah, I agree. And I am interested in seeing sort of the packaged version of what these things look like when they go down. The part that I'm concerned about, and I want to, the danger I want us to avoid is that it happens sort of in a place where those things are sort of put together in a kind of slate where it's, hey, everybody, just vote on this. And we don't get the chance to dig in. And I know this has been sort of frustrating to go through. And I wouldn't say that it's because of the process we're going through as much as the sort of troubles with getting the new financial system lined up for us to have the transparency to dig in on these conversations. But now that we do have that transparency to say we're talking about a media specialist position at this, and we're talking about a social worker at that, and electricity at that, I feel like we're able to dig in. And I think these conversations are giving everybody that transparency. I think we'll have a really nice sort of continued conversation on Thursday. And if anyone from central office wants to show up with we would recommend this, and this to get you to this level, and this, and this to get you, like, happy to look at that. But I also want us all to be open to looking at each one of these things and debating them, right, as individual items too. I worry about the packaging of this, and this gets you to, let's say 3% or 3.5%. And then we're looking at it as a package, as opposed to looking at each one of the individual items and doing our best at that level.
I guess I've never in the past looked at it as a package deal. It was, here are 15 or 20 things that you can look at if you want to, reduce to this point. And then we've I think ad nauseum discussed individual items and whether or not, all right, if we take this one out, it's going to get us here. If we take this one out, it's going to get us here, and have just gone back and forth in great detail.
Yeah, I certainly didn't mean to insult Jeff or any of the process, people who have run the process in the past. My experience wasn't great, and I think this is working. So sorry, Jeff.
Well, and it's fine. I mean, everybody has their own view. I think though, what we're going to find is that after the April meeting, when the Board of Finance gives you the number, and you go, okay, we've got to cut 100,000, let's say, or 50, or whatever the magic number is, then, to Jenny's point, that's when you've got a list of things.
Yep.
And you're saying, well, we could do it this way, or we could do it that way. It's going to cut this, or it's going to cut that. So this is a nice process. I certainly have no problem with it whatsoever. And I think it's good to have open discussion, but there will come that meeting on April the 9th or whatever our day is, that we're going to be taking one from column A and two from column B.
Mr. Chair, may I add two things
Please.
quickly? To Mr. Parker's earlier question, that 0.5 technology assistant, I've had a colleague whisper in my ear that is originally approved at 0.5, and then you all increased it to 1.0 due to COVID. So you all, post the budget, you all, because of COVID, because of technology, you increased it. And then in regards to that meeting in April, if you give me enough advance notice, I'd like to go put my vacation time in and make sure I'm wherever you need to be.
No, sir.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Anything else we want to make sure that we put on the radar of our building leaders or administrators to make sure we're ready in every way possible for Thursday? Okay. Awesome. Thank you very much. I think that will move us on to public comment. I lost my participants window. Here we go. Okay, just looking for hand raisers or anyone who wants to flag us down in video. I'll just give it a 10 count just to make sure everyone has an opportunity. Okay. Board member comment? Okay. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Randy beat you, Jeff.
Okay.
All right, Randy.
He generally does.
Second from Jeff. All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Unanimously, we are adjourned at 10:28 p.m. Thank you very much.